of a 2-bedroom dwelling on land adjacent to 46 Goodyear Street. The application site is located within this red line boundary here, south of Goodyear Street and to the east of number 46. The area is predominantly residential in nature. It includes a mix of terraced and semi-detached dwellings. Bounding the property to the east, along here, are properties along Victoria Street, and immediately adjoining the property to the south are properties along Faulkner Street. Dwellings within Goodyear Street generally do not benefit from their own parking spaces, and so there is a high level of on-street parking along Goodyear Street and surrounding streets. This is an aerial image of the site which shows the site in context with surrounding development. The site currently comprises undeveloped land originally used as garden space. This is a photograph from Goodyear Street looking towards the site. So we can see that on the left-hand side here, adjacent to number 46 Goodyear Street. And this is another photograph looking towards the site in context with number 46 and 44 Goodyear Street. Here we've got a photograph looking along the south side of Goodyear Street. This photograph shows a row of terraced dwellings with a strong build line set back from the road slightly, low-level brick walls along the front boundary. You can see some variation along the street, including bay windows, small front dormers, and there's a mix of brick and render in terms of materials. This is another photograph looking along Goodyear Street. So the long row of terraced properties, which I've mentioned, are on the left-hand side, and we've got larger semi-detached properties on the right-hand side. And you can see here the on-street parking along the street. This is a photograph taken from Goodyear Street, looking towards the site, as well as the rear of properties along Victoria Street, which we can see here. And this is a photograph taken from Goodyear Street directly looking into the site. This is a photograph of the site looking towards this shared boundary with properties along Victoria Street. The shared boundary comprises the rear elevation of brick and block built outbuildings located at the end of the rear gardens of properties along Victoria Street. We've got a photograph from within the site looking towards that boundary again towards Victoria Street. And here we've got a photograph from within the site looking towards the neighbouring property 46 Goodyear Street, with the boundary fence separating the site from the property. I'm just going to run through the history of the site to give everything a bit more context, because there have been a number of previous approvals and refusals at the site. The image on your screen now shows the previously approved building, which was granted in 2019 but never implemented. This application was for 2 one-bed flats. The previous proposal was a detached dwelling, but was similar to the current proposal in terms of height, scale, width, and architectural features, including a small front dormer and a large box dormer to the rear, as well as a single-storey rear projection. As with the current proposal, which I'll show you in a minute, no on-street parking was proposed for this scheme. And this was the proposed site plan of the previous approval. Here you can see that the building was set back to follow the building line, and included garden space to the rear. So, as mentioned within the officer's report, since 2019 there has been a number of refusals at the site. This plan shows the proposed elevation of 23 00297 FUL. This was a proposal for a larger 4-bedroom dwelling with on-site parking space and a substantial 2-storey rear projection. The application was refused at the time due to impact on amenity, impact on the street scene, and that the proposal did not demonstrate that it could provide a single parking space of a sufficient size. And this is the proposed site plan. You can see here where the parking space was proposed. And this slide just shows the most recent refusal of the site for a 3-bedroom dwelling. This proposal didn't include parking on site and included an amended design and scaled back 2-storey rear projection. The application was refused due to an unacceptable impact on the highway, unacceptable cycle storage provision, lack of biodiversity net gain, and insufficient drainage details, but was found to be acceptable in terms of design and impact upon amenity. I'll now run through the plans proposed as part of this current application. This, as I've said before, is a proposal for a 2-bed dwelling, as opposed to the most recent refusals, which have been for 4 and 3-bedroom dwellings. The slide shows a proposed block plan. The application proposes the construction of a dwelling which would form the end of the terraced row and would be attached to number 46 Goodyear Street. The proposal would follow the building line of the street and would include a single-storey rear extension. A low-level brick wall would be constructed along the front boundary. Bin storage would be located to the east side, and cycle storage has been proposed to the rear. And you'll see from the block plan that no on-street parking is proposed for this scheme.
Zoom in on that picture.
Because it only shows the presentation mode. I don't know if I can.
It's easier, but we've got a copy.
Yes, well, even so, it's not, I can't read all that, I don't really base
Can we run through the slides and then we'll get all the way through and then we'll, because we'll have to turn the presentation off to then go into the next one.
So we can see the existing elevations, which show the current site here in relation to neighbouring dwellings 46 and 44 Goodyear Street. So the site would be located to the left-hand side of these. This slide shows the proposed front and south-east side elevation. So the dwelling is located here. The dwelling would be constructed from red brick and would be consistent with the other dwellings in terms of height and width, and would include a small dormer within the front elevation. The side elevation shows the extent of the single-storey rear extension. And here we've got the proposed rear extension to the properties here, and the rear elevation even. On the rear elevation, we can see the single-storey rear projection and a box dormer within the roof space. This is a 3D visual image of the proposed dwelling in context with number 46. This slide shows the proposed floor plan. The dwelling would be set over 3 floors with the bedrooms provided on the upper floors. And the proposed dwelling would meet national space standards. Concerns have been raised from neighbouring residents in terms of design, impact on neighbouring amenity and highways. The design of the proposed dwelling is considered to be in all acceptable. The proposal would introduce a dwelling of a similar size and scale to neighbouring development that wouldn't appear out of keeping with the street scene. The large rear box dormer has been considered undesirable by officers. However, when considering its position away from Goodyear Street, the fact that a dormer of a similar size and scale has been granted at the site previously, and that there are other large dormers within the surrounding area, this has been considered on balance acceptable. Amenity impacts have been carefully considered as part of the proposal. Compared with previous refusals on site, the proposed dwelling has been scaled back to reduce amenity impacts, with the dwelling now being a similar size and scale to the previous approval at the site. So it was not considered that the proposal would result in unacceptable levels of overlooking, overbearing or overshadowing for neighbouring occupants. Concerns have also been raised in regards to the lack of on-street parking being provided and the resulting impact on the highway network. This has been carefully considered by the Highways Authority, who have taken account that the dwelling proposed through this application is a 2-bedroom dwelling rather than the previously refused 3 and 4-bedroom dwellings. Highways have confirmed that the expected vehicle ownership demonstrated in the transport statement would not result in a detrimental impact on the highway or highway safety to warrant refusal of the application. Taking account of the sustainable location of the site, previous permission for 2 flats on site without parking, and site visits which have been carried out, which have shown parking within a 200-metre radius. It's therefore recommended that this planning application is granted, subject to conditions as set out within the officer's report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. We now move on to public speaking. We have the ward member first of all, and then representative the agent. Councillor Patel, would you like to come forward? You have 5 minutes to speak. Would you like a 1-minute warning?
Yeah, thank you very much for allowing me to speak today. This application is, in some respects, it's positive because you want something to happen with that land. It's been derelict for quite a long time now. So it's good to see that something is happening. The owner of the land wants to do something positive with it. But at the same time, I've had so many residents contact me and speak to me about the application, and the main concerns are around sort of loss of privacy, loss of light, and the biggest one is the parking. Parking's a big problem already in the area. It's already the most densely populated ward in the whole of Gloucester. And we often find traffic enforcement in the area. Illegal parking is an issue, not just around Goodyear Street, but it's a general problem around my ward and across the city. But I have witnessed traffic wardens there on Goodyear Street issuing fines for illegally parked vehicles. We've had issues with waste and recycling collections because of the illegal parking all around that site, around Goodyear Street, Dilly Street, Falkland Street, Victoria Street, Rycroft Street even. And the fact that there is going to be no provision for parking, that's the biggest concern around parking and safety. There have been a few residents who have said to me that they've had their driveways and their access blocked multiple times, albeit sometimes it may not be the same residents, or it may not even be any residents, but it may be visitors. I think one of the comments in the report was that parking is not an issue because there's parking within, when there have been site visits, there was parking within 200 metres of the site. All the streets around Goodyear Street, primarily in the daytime, were used by commuters quite often. So a lot of commuters, people who work in town centre, etc., they come and park there because it's free parking. And in the evening, there's residents, and just round the corner from the site, there's also a cafe that's open till late in the evenings. So that brings some volume of traffic as well. I believe you had some late evidence provided, which were some photos, which hopefully you've had a chance to look at. And that shows over the course of about a week, I think it was, again at different times, especially in the evenings, there is no parking available. There's even cars parked illegally in the photographs. So that's the biggest problem. That's the biggest concern. But I appreciate something needs to be done with that land, and well, it is what it is. But yeah, lots of the other issues, as I said already, loss of light and loss of privacy. There have been issues around fly tipping near the site, but that's not from the site. That's people living in rental accommodation nearby who think it's acceptable to fly tip. That has improved. I have noticed in recent times that's improved. So that's a positive there.
I think
I
you
think
have
that's
got to your
probably-
5
yeah,
minutes.
I think I'll cover the points. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. Cheers.
Thank you very much indeed. Can I now ask Charlie Simpson to address the committee? You also have 5 minutes. Would you like a 1-minute warning?
Good evening, Chair and members. My name is Charlie Simpson from Birdie Planning Associates, and I am here this evening on behalf of the applicants in support of the proposal. The officer has recommended the application for approval, and we fully endorse this recommendation and the clear evidence which underpins this conclusion. We would also like to acknowledge her proactive engagement throughout the application process, as well as in the thorough and well-presented report before you this evening. The application was called in by a local councillor for 3 key reasons, namely that Barton and Tredworth is already the most densely populated area in the city, and adding another 2-bed property would exacerbate this. The proposed development would have a negative impact on neighbouring properties in respect to loss of light and privacy, and the development would not include any off-road parking. These matters have been carefully considered as set out in the officer's report and in the responses from the relevant statutory consultees. In regard to parking, Gloucestershire County Council Highways has confirmed that the development would not result in an unacceptable impact on the highway or highway safety, and therefore has raised no objection to the proposal. In terms of the design and amenity, the officer's assessment sets out clearly that the scheme would not result in an unacceptable level of harm to neighbouring properties. Furthermore, we have worked closely with the council to address the historic reasons for refusal for previous schemes on the site and to ensure that the scheme is policy compliant, well designed and appropriate, with a scale and form that integrates well with the character of the surrounding area. Given the absence of objections from any statutory consultees and the clear findings set out in the officer's report, it would be unreasonable to refuse the application on the grounds on which the application has been called in the committee. I would also like to highlight that Gloucester City Council is currently unable to demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply. As such, paragraph 11D of the NPPF therefore applies, meaning that the tilted balance is engaged and development should be approved unless any harm significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits of the scheme. This proposal would make efficient use of a currently underutilised site, would deliver a high-quality home in a highly sustainable location, and provide a modest yet valuable contribution to meeting the city's housing needs. For these reasons, and those set out within the officer's report, we respectfully ask members to grant planning permission for this proposal. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you very much indeed. It's now time for members' questions. Are there any members who'd like to ask questions that are of material consideration to the application? Please note we're not yet in debate. Just save any comments for the debate phase of the meeting. Do just stick to direct and pertinent questions, please, to myself or to the relevant officer. Thank you very much. Councillor Riederhold, then Councillor Jones.
I think it was Councillor Chambers first.
Councillor Jones first.
No.
Councillor Riederhold, then Councillor Jones. Councillor Stephanie Chambers.
No. Stephanie Chambers first.
Stephanie Chambers first.
Rita Holt second.
Then Riederhold. And then
Then Jones.
Gravells.
No, then Joe. Then Gravel.
Councillor Stephanie Chambers, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've got a couple of questions regarding the highways issue and then one for the planning officer. So in regards to highways, it mentions the NTRAN transport statement averages that average vehicle ownership is for this ward is 1. I've got 2 questions in relation to that. The first question being, how up to date is that data? So when was that report? And then the second, is that a blanket average across all the ward, or is that for 2-bedroom properties that have an average of 1 vehicle?
Highways.
The highways have information on that, please.
Thank you for the question. So I think your first point was about the NTRAN transport analysis of car ownership. So that was taken from the 2021 census. And I think sorry, could you repeat what your second question was?
Is that a blanket average across the ward? Is that a blanket average or for 2-bedroom properties?
Yeah, thank you. So that's an average for the ward. I should qualify that I went ahead and did a further analysis of the 2021 census based on 2-bedroom dwellings, and came up with an average of just over 1 vehicle per 2-bedroom dwelling. So it's about 0.6 vehicles per dwelling. So the census has a category on car ownership, which is broken down by number of bedrooms, and you can divide that by the number of vehicles owned. And so from that, I got an average of just over 1 vehicle. So 0.6, I think it is, per bedroom for the Tredworth and Barton ward.
Thank you, that was really, really helpful. And then the other question, because my biggest concern is the parking issue really in relation to this. And I know we take each application on individually, but then what is the tipping point within an area? Because this is a highly high density area. So when do you start to think, well, this area is saturated now, and the parking issues, even if 1 more property is not going to make a big difference, 1 more, then 1 more, then 1 more. So when will that tipping point be, or do you look at that?
Yeah, so thank you. So obviously parking is an issue in this area. It is very, very much parked up during the day and night. I did look at it sort of with site visits during the day and the night. So I did surveys myself, looking at the amount of vehicles parked and available spaces within 200 metres of the site, which is based on something called the Lambeth, which is the Borough of Lambeth parking survey analysis methodology. That's Borough of Lambeth in London. So this is a commonly considered suitable distance for expecting people to walk from parked vehicle to their dwelling. And during those surveys, I found several spaces within 200 metres of the site on either Goodyear Street itself or also some of the neighbouring streets. So that was basically sort of like for my own comfort to see that there was vehicle spaces available, albeit sort of like not at the same times of day all the time. So that's sort of like part of sort of like my analysis of how I came to the conclusion that there was sufficient capacity, albeit very limited, at certain times of day and certain times of night. Beyond that, we have a policy ground to sort of account for the location of the site in terms of its distance to amenities. It's obviously proximity to the city centre and facilities by foot, cycle and whatnot, which obviously also has a bearing on sort of like accepting a property with or without vehicle parking available to it. I could go on, but hopefully that answers your question.
And then my very, very last question for highways is that in regards to the cycling, and I think one of the pictures just shows somebody cycling at the middle, but because it's a highly density area and a lot of cars parked, how near is, or are there any plans to bring in more safer cycleways in the area? Because it does look to me quite a dubious place, lots of parked cars, particularly this time of year where it's dark a lot of the time. So are there any plans to bring in cycleways in that area?
With regard to cycle schemes in the area, I'm not aware of any currently planned cycle schemes in the area. I know. I think you're probably talking about the fact that at the end of Goodyear Street, there's a cycle only sort of like connection from it to the neighbouring street. Other than that, I think it's basically an on-street sort of like situation where people sort of like cycle sort of like on the streets with traffic. Yeah, so that's as far as I know.
Councillor Wiederhold.
Thank you, Chair. The land was described by the ward councillor as derelict, and quite clearly looking at the photographs, it doesn't look as if it's a pristine parkland. But looking at the history, there's been a number of applications to build there, but why was nothing ever built there originally?
I wouldn't know the answer to that question, kind of in terms of when that area was built out. I'm not sure why that was kept unbuilt, but historically it's been used as residential garden space, I believe, for one of the properties along Faulkner Street.
Our legal advisor has something to say.
Just to assist the committee, whether something has been built in compliance with planning permission in the past historically is not a material consideration. You have to judge this application on its own merits entirely. It is something you can weigh in the balance, but it's not really a material consideration why somebody has not implemented a planning permission in the past.
Thank you. The question wasn't really about the previous planning permissions, but rather why this particular piece of land has never been developed. It just seems strange that in a high density area, when the original buildings were built, that this parcel of land was left vacant.
Understood, but it's not a material consideration.
Councillor Wiederhold, do you have any more questions? Thank you. Councillor Jones?
Thank you, Chair. My question's concerning page 7 of the pact. I don't understand. Obviously, on the one hand, you can park anywhere because there's no double yellow lines. There's some double yellow lines, and then there's a white hashed box. I don't know what that is. It's the highways. I don't understand. And obviously, cars shouldn't be parked on the pavements anyway. It's got a white box. I don't know what the white box is.
Page 7 of the latest aerial. Yeah.
So I believe we're looking at the photos of the streets. Correct. He means the opposite part. Okay. Yeah. So, I'm not a lining person in the council, but from what I can gather, what you're looking at there is the WL lines are obviously no waiting at any time. The white sort of dashed box that's sort of crossing from the pavement, half of the pavement to the carriageway, is, I believe, a parking bay. So it's marking out sort of like an area where it's directing people to park on street. So it's basically sort of like a parking bay. The white sort of box area you see running down the, I think it's the right hand side of Goodyear Street there. And yeah, that's what I can gather of it.
So there's a white hashed box and the cars are allowed to park on the pavements. That's what it looks like from this picture. I'm sure organisations, charities like Living Streets wouldn't be so keen on people parking. And as Councillor Chambers said about, the cyclists cycling down the street.
Are we moving into debate here?
My question is, I don't understand the legality of a box that has no bearing on parking. It's on the pavements. You shouldn't be parking on the pavements.
Councillor Patel, I'm sorry, I don't think you can speak at this point. You can't speak at this moment, even if you've got something relevant to say. It's too late. We have to rely on the officers' reports. We can't. We have to. I think we have to stop you there. We've got some comments here.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Jones. I wasn't aware that Mark didn't know that this is a 2 up, 2 down partial pavement parking marking. So that's the intention of the white box, as Councillor Javid also just said. Yeah.
Councillor Jones, any more thoughts, questions? Not at this point. Councillor Gravels, I believe, is next.
Yeah, just to be clear, I'm a substitute member this evening. I'm not a member of the planning committee. So I thought all councillors spoke well, representing his neighbourhood. I thought that was a good job. Is it totally impractical for us as a committee to say to the applicant, we really want to see some evidence that you tried to make a parking space within the curtilage of the building?
Thank you, Chair, through you. I just remind members that we're here to look at the applications that's submitted to us. That's what we're considering today. So our role of the committee is to assess the proposal against the planning policy and material considerations. We're not here to renegotiate or request amendments. Any changes to the scheme would need to be initiated by the applicant and processed through the proper channels, which would likely involve further reconsultation. So just urge you to look at the application before us. Now, if you are unhappy with the application before us, then you need to make your decision accordingly. But we can only determine what we have. We're not here to negotiate amendments to this application.
I just come back on that because I can't unhear what I've already heard this evening, and that influences the way I want to see us proceed. So are you suggesting that we could defer the decision for more work to be done by the applicant?
No, you can't. You can't defer for the applicant to come back with another application, albeit slightly amended, in keeping with what the committee wants or members of the committee want. The application is before you as it is, warts and all, and you have to determine it as it is. You can apply conditions to ameliorate any adverse impact that you feel is there, but this is the application. You decide and determine on the merits of this application.
I'm not here to be awkward, but equally I'm here to understand what we're doing. We've deferred applications before for more work to be done and then looked at them in a subsequent planning committee. Why are you saying that, no, you can't do that, you can't defer it, when we've deferred it in the past? Not this application, but other applications.
If I could explain, you can defer for further clarity. You can defer for further information. But if the information is freely available to you now, before you now, and the reality of the situation here is that the application is as it is, without parking, as it stands, and that's not going to change if we defer it, because the application will remain what it is. So you can defer it if there is some grey area or shadowy aspect to this particular application which you want clarified. But that is a world apart from actually wanting the application to be looked at in its entirety and represented. I think we have to differentiate between the two. So I wouldn't want to take away the committee's right to defer, but it has to be for the right reasons.
Well, I'm not very happy with that, but hey, there's not much I can do, is there?
Are there any more questions? Councillor Barmere.
It might sound silly, but my question is parking space compulsory for planning Is parking space compulsory for planning permission?
Can you repeat it and shout at us, please?
I said it might sound silly, but what I'm saying is parking compulsory for planning permission?
I'll have a go. We have a parking standard, it's guidance. We need to consider the evidence and whether or not we could sustain an objection on highway safety grounds. We've considered that. We didn't have any lack of clarity or require any further information about the information submitted. We had all the information before us. We were very clear. We came to the view that we could not sustain an objection, and we can't recommend that an objection is sustained on highways grounds.
Thank you very much. Any more questions? I think we can go into debate now. Councillor Chambers, is this a question or debate? Debate. Okay, moving into debate. Councillor Alistair Chambers.
Thank you, Chair. I've reviewed the papers and I can't see anything that stands out as a material reason to refuse the project. We're looking at the waste area here, and it looks like an eyesore. Potentially fly tippings taking place there in the past. I've driven past there a few times. I've seen waste build up, so I think it's a good use of land for a property. There's a housing need in Gloucester. I think they've got 2,500 people needing homes. 2 beds is one of the main shortfalls in the city, so I think a 2 bed is perfect for the area. I don't think it's overcrowding. I think the previous applications that have shown 4 bed and 3 beds have been refused for valid reasons for being overdeveloped in the size, and I probably would have refused those the same. But given that it's a 2 bed, I think it's the perfect siting and situation for the land. I had concerns about the materials being used, but I noticed in the condition 3 that material samples have to be proposed and issued to the council before the development takes place. So that's fantastic. That's my worries, because sometimes in this area, Barton, Treadwith, you get people using different materials that aren't sort of native to the area, and it can look like, excuse the word, a bit like a slum in some areas. So to have a proper material guidance to be given and to be submitted beforehand is great to see. And I also note the condition as well about the low-level wall to be built once you get to ground level. Parking would have been ideal, having a parking space, but unfortunately, because of the site situation, it's not achievable. But I think I welcome the cycling storage areas. I think that's a great asset. So for myself, I can't see any reason why we should refuse this application. I think it's a good application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else who wants to make a comment? Councillor Stephanie Chambers.
Thank you, Chair. I do have some, and I think they're serious concerns, and as Councillor Saj Patel raised, and there are concerns in the local area about the parking issues. I understand, and it was really good to hear the data and how you've worked that out. I think 2021, the census, you know, is slightly old and things do move on. And it does mention that this is in an area close to bus routes and cycling, etc. But then there's also the things where people do have to commute to rural areas that don't have bus routes, and nighttime workers that do need cars and to get to safely to places of work, etc. So I think those considerations do need to be listened to, and I am very, very concerned about this area and the tipping point. I've witnessed myself frustrations, not just in relation to parking, but the narrow roads, the safety of cyclists, people meeting one way and trying to get past, and you know, some of the road rage that can cause in the area and the tensions within the community. And I think that is a real need that we do need to listen to. However, on balance, looking at this, you know, it is an area ripe to have a new property. We do have a housing need. So on balance, I think I will be supporting this application. The only other thing that I think is slightly sad to see is the biodiversity statement within the report, which I think, if I recall, mentions that the net biodiversity net gain can't be met on site because the area is not big enough, I think it mentioned. Now, there are different ways you can introduce that through shrubbery, not just trees, which maybe cause root issues, but shrubberies, etc. So I would like to see some sort of shrubberies, and I would hope the applicant takes that on board and tries to retain some biodiversity in Barton and Treadworth on this, what is a green space now, but will be built up. So they're my only comments, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does anybody else have anything to add? Councillor Harris and then Councillor.
Yeah, I think it's a good application. It's a good use of the space that's available. My only niggle with it is that looking at the proposed elevations and also on Street View, the two properties that it will be adjoining onto have quite a, in my opinion, nice design of their windows and the arches over the doorways. It would have been nice to have seen that kind of style continued across the street. I'm not sure whether we might want to add a condition to say that the design of the upper window ledges is in keeping with the existing street scene there, so it continues across the street. I do note, however, that it is just the two properties to the side of it that have that design, and looking at Street View further down the street, there is quite a mix in the street of that design. But I just think it would finish the terrace off nicely if those three properties were kind of in keeping in style to some extent.
Through you, Chair. Nice. The recommendation tonight is to delegate authority to us subject to the conditions. We can certainly look at the condition, the materials condition, and look at the wording to incorporate the window. But what I would remind members is that with conditions, the use of conditions would mean that you would not permit without that condition. So my question back to you is, would you refuse the application without that window treatment? Because that's essentially what each condition should be there to do, is to make the application acceptable in planning terms. But we do have a materials condition, so there is already some further potential there.
the point you make is a valid point. There's no question about that. But unfortunately, there are certain criteria to satisfy for conditions. One of which is it necessary? I think it satisfies the other criteria, precise, reasonable, and all relevant. But I don't think it would satisfy that criteria. So I would suggest to you, if you want to retain some sort of control over the final end product, to perhaps introduce an informative, to make your view known in terms of an informative. That's what the committee would like.
Thank you very much. Are you happy with that compromise? Thank you. Councillor Jones, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just say one of the photographs shows the diversity of properties. I mean, I would have had a question about dormer windows, but at the other end of the street there are dormer windows. And I think it's quite nice that there's a diversity of slightly different properties. Another point, main point I wanted to raise was the issue about, you talk about biodiversity net gain, but it's poor quality green space as it is at the moment. Anyway, you're not gaining or losing anything other than, it's a bit of a dump at the moment. But there is an issue about, obviously, if you start building concrete, brick, hard surfaces, there's an issue that's been flagged up about getting rid of the flood water or the accumulation of water through suds or other means of soakaways. So that's the issue, question mark I have. Thank you.
I think we'll take that as a comment, an observation. Thank you. Anybody else to speak? Councillor Barmy.
In my view, there is a shortage of stock at the moment, as Councillor Chambers said. So we need to build more and more properties if we come across in decent lands like this. I think that this will alleviate some of the problems of housing, because we already has got loads of people on housing lists. And at the moment, the waiting list is more than 15 years. So I recommend this is a really good application, and I've got my support for it.
Thank you very much. Councillor Wiederhold.
Thank you, Chair. I too think that using some derelict land to build housing, which we need, is a good use of derelict land. I do note, however, that parking around there is a problem. It's just outside of the permitted zone for Gloucester City. Perhaps in the future that zone could increase to include that area. That may change parking there. But right now I think we have to accept what we have, and I'm quite happy to propose to support this proposal.
Thank you very much. Is that an end to the debate? I don't think I have any. Oh, Councillor Alistair Chambers.
I'd like to recommend that this goes through to the vote, and that I propose that we accept this approval.
Who would like to second that, please? Councillor Jones. Thank you very much. Are we happy to vote on the proposal to approve it? Anybody objecting? Anybody abstaining? Councillor Gravel. Thank you very much. So that application is approved. Thank you very much indeed.
You just have to mention that the decision has been delegated in compliance.
We're moving on to agenda item 6 now, delegated decisions. We'll just wait a little while for Councillor Chambers to come back into the chamber. Okay, we come to agenda item 6, it's delegated decisions. Are members content to note the delegated decisions? Yes, everybody happy with that? Thank you very much. So now the date of the next meeting, which will be on January the 6th. So I can wish you a happy Christmas and holiday season and a good start to the new year. And we'll see you on January the 6th, which I think is 12th night. Thank you. Good evening.